Welcome, traveler. You've wandered far across Azeroth, past crumbling ruins, whispering forests, and windswept valleys. Now, as the stars begin to shimmer above the darkened sky, you've arrived at a quiet place, where tales live on the edge of sleep and memories drift like mist through time. Tonight, we tell the story of a soul caught between two worlds, the legacy of a warlord and the heart of a peacemaker, a child of prophecy, a warrior of restraint, a leader tested by fire and spirit. Tonight, we whisper the life of Thrall, son of Durotan, last of the Frostwolf bloodline, Warchief, shaman, wanderer. So close your eyes, let the sound of the fire crackle quietly nearby. Breathe deep, and let your thoughts sink gently into the earth. The tale begins long ago, before the Horde was the Horde you know, before the wars, before the whispers turned to war cries. In a land of frost and wolves, a child was born. The wind howled across the white steppes of Frostfire Ridge, where the snow never melted and the sky burned with northern light. Here, in the land of ancestral orcish spirits, the Frostwolf clan made its home, far from the thrones and blades of war. In a modest cave warmed by fire and fur, two orcs awaited the birth of their only child. His mother, Draka, fierce and strong, once mocked for weakness, now stood tall, her eyes unwavering. His father, Durotan, chieftain of the Frostwolves, clenched his fists with quiet hope. Outside, the wolves circled, not in hunger, but in witness. For the spirits had whispered of this birth, a soul bound to balance, between the legacy of the blade and the song of the earth. The child was born in silence, no crying, just breath, slow and calm. Eyes open, green as spring grass beneath snow. Draka held him close and whispered, "Thrall, that will not be your name, but it will be your story." Durotan smiled faintly. "We name him Goal." But peace, as it often is, was short-lived. The Frostwolf clan had resisted Gul'dan, the warlock whose whispers brought demons and blood. Durotan saw through the poison. He saw the trap in the gift. So Gul'dan struck from the shadows. A trap was laid. A messenger came bearing false hope of alliance. And Durotan and Draka, refusing to cower, journeyed across the snows, carrying their infant son with them. They were ambushed by assassins. Blades gleamed like ice. There was no trial, no words, only blood in the snow. Durotan fought fiercely, but fell. Draka, too, succumbed, though not before slaying one of their killers with nothing but her teeth. And the baby, Goal, were left crying in the snow, alone. He was found not by orcs, but by humans. A patrol from Durnhold Keep, led by a man named Adalis Blackmore, came upon the scene. They did not know who the child was, only that he was an orcling, wrapped in wolf fur, eyes like emerald fire. Blackmore did not kill the child. Instead, he took him, not out of mercy, but opportunity. He brought the child back to Durnhold, a fortress prison carved into the hills of Lord Aeron, and there he gave the baby a new name, Thrall. It meant slave in the tongue of the humans. Blackmore had plans. He would raise this orc as a weapon, not of war, but of spectacle. A trained beast broken in chains, a gladiator, a puppet, a pet project that would one day help him control the Horde, or what was left of it. And so, Thrall was raised behind stone walls and iron gates, taught to speak, but not to question, trained to fight, but not to choose. He knew the lash before he knew a lullaby, but Blackmore was cunning. He wanted Thrall to be more than a brute. So he had him taught to read, history, tactics, philosophy. He gave him tutors, books, scrolls, and for a time, Thrall grew with a strange kind of duality. By day, he sparred in sand pits and bruised beneath fists. By night, he read of empires, strategy and honor, words that echoed something deeper in him, a spark of something old, familiar, a yearning to belong. Though raised in chains, Thrall's spirit never fully broke. He moved like a soldier, thought like a scholar, and dreamed like a chieftain. He did not know his lineage, not yet. But when he stared at the full moon through the iron bars, he could feel something stir in his blood, a howl that did not come from his mouth, but from within, a memory of snow, of fire, of wolves. Beyond the hills of Hillsbrad foothills, where the grass grew thick and fog curled around the treetops, stood a grim fortress carved into the stone, Durnhold Keep. Its walls rose like jagged teeth, its towers crowned with banners of faded crimson. A place not of celebration, but of control. Within those cold walls, the child named Thrall lived and waited. He did not wait for freedom. Not yet. For freedom was a word he did not yet understand. He waited for command, for the bell that called him to the training pit, for the voice that ordered him to kneel. This was the rhythm of his world: routine, discipline, pain. Adalus Blackmore, commander of Durnhold, was no fool. He was ambitious, dangerously so. A man of refinement and excess, of cunning dressed in velvet and wine. He had once fought in the Second War, had seen the orcs rise and fall. He believed that the shattered remnants of the Horde could be bent, not with fire, but with puppetry. And Thrall was his masterpiece. "He'll be their Warchief," Blackmore once said, swirling his goblet, "and they'll follow him like dogs." He dreamed of ruling through Thrall, of placing a slave upon a throne, with invisible strings wrapped tight around his fists. From a young age, Thrall was drilled in the art of combat. Morning to night, beneath the eyes of instructors, he learned to block, strike, disarm, endure. He was not allowed to fail. Every misstep was corrected with a cane. Every loss was a lesson written in bruises. And yet, he learned, faster than the others, smarter, more graceful. He fought not with blind rage, but with focus. His body hardened, his mind sharpened. He became a gladiator. But inside, he remained a boy searching for something beyond the steel. Thrall had few comforts: a narrow cell with a straw bed, a window barely wide enough to let the wind through. He would sit there at night, read in stolen pages of human philosophy, wondering what life was like outside the stone. One of the few people who treated him with any measure of kindness was a young girl named Teretha Foxton, the daughter of a servant. She often brought him water, and once a book, a human child, a slave's only friend. They spoke in whispers, and for a moment he felt seen, not as a weapon, not as a beast, but as a person. Sometimes Thrall would dream, not of his cell, not of the fortress, but of snow, of wolves howling beneath the moon, of a fire glowing in the heart of a cave, and voices chanting in a tongue he did not know. He saw visions of orcs with painted faces, of totems carved from bone, and eyes that shimmered with storms. In these dreams, the chains were gone, and he ran free, barefoot across ancient grasslands, wind in his hair, earth at his feet. He awoke each time with a deep ache in his chest. Not fear, longing. As Thrall grew older, he began to question. He watched how Blackmore treated others, his cruelty, his manipulation, his thirst for control. He saw how the guards feared him, not respected him. He heard how the prisoners cursed his name, and he wondered, If this was the man meant to rule through him, was that truly strength? Or was there something else? Another path? Another kind of power, not born from domination, but connection. One day, while eavesdropping on 2 guards, Thrall heard the word Horde. It sent a chill down his spine. They spoke of it like a memory, a great army, once united, now shattered and broken. Scattered to camps, watched, guarded. Some orcs were still out there, in internment camps, kept as prisoners of war. Others, it was said, had vanished into the wilds. Free orcs. The thought lingered in Thrall's mind for days, not as fantasy, but as hope. It was Teretha who first helped him act on that hope. Late one night, after a brutal match in the arena, she came to him with fear in her eyes and a small bag of supplies in her hands. "There's a way out," she whispered. "A crack in the cliff wall, behind the kennel. You'll have to move fast." Thrall blinked in disbelief. "Why would you help me?" She looked down. "Because you don't belong here. Because you never did." They embraced, briefly. And then he ran. Beneath the cover of night, Thrall slipped through the gap in the stone. The wind hit him like a slap, cold, wild, alive. He ran through mud and bramble, across freezing rivers and jagged cliffs. Alarms rang behind him. Torches lit the sky, but he did not stop. For the first time in his life, he was not inside. He was not a prisoner. He was not Thrall, not just Thrall. He was something more, something ancient, something forgotten, and waiting to be remembered. The world beyond Durnhold was unlike anything Thrall had known. No walls, no chains, no eyes watching from the shadows. Only sky, vast and deep. Only wind, wild and full of scents unknown. Only silence, the kind that sings with freedom. He moved through the Hillsbrad foothills, ducking under branches, his bare feet pressing into soft earth. Each step took him farther from captivity, and closer to something he could not yet name. He did not know where to go, but he knew he could not go back. The wilds were not kind. He had no guide, no map. Food was scarce, and sleep came fitfully beneath twisted roots or beside cold rivers. But something in Thrall awoke in the wild. He listened to birds calling in patterns, to the whisper of leaves in wind, to the low groan of the land as dawn crept over the hills. In the stillness, he felt less alone. He was beginning to understand that the world itself was alive, and that some part of him was beginning to listen. Days passed, then weeks. As Thrall wandered, he began to find signs of others, orcish sigils carved into stone, totems half buried in moss, painted hides fluttering in the breeze. They were remnants, traces of a culture long suppressed. One night, he found a ruin, the remains of a camp long since abandoned. He sat beside the ashes of a dead fire, and in his sleep, he dreamed again. He stood on snow, not a memory, not quite. The wind howled through jagged peaks, and before him stood an orc, tall, cloaked in wolf pelts, eyes as bright as the moon. He did not speak, but Thrall felt something ancient in his gaze. He reached out, and the dream shattered like ice. When Thrall awoke, the sun was rising, and beside him lay a stone medallion carved with the Frostwolf crest. Following rumors from traveling merchants, Thrall learned of a nearby internment camp. It was said to hold what remained of the Orcish warriors from the Second War, once feared, now forgotten. He approached it cautiously. High wooden walls, human guards in armor, and inside, the shapes of his people. He saw them through the cracks in the palisade, Large, muscular orcs, slumped, vacant, eyes dulled by years of captivity. They did not speak. They barely moved. It was not a prison of bars, but of spirit. Not far from the camp in the wilder lands beyond, Thrall encountered a patrol. But it was not human. It was orcish. At their head stood a warrior like fire made flesh, his hair black as shadow, bound in a warrior's tale, his body scarred and strong, and his voice deep, fierce, filled with thunder. Grommash Hellscream, chieftain of the Warsong clan, one of the last orcs still free. He saw Thrall not as a threat, but as a curiosity. "You wear chains like ghosts," Grom said, looking Thrall over. "But your eyes, they burn. Who are you, boy?" Thrall bowed his head. "I don't know. I'm searching." Grommash grinned, sharp and savage. "Then you found something. Come, there's more to show you." In a hidden camp nestled in the trees, Thrall saw it. The embers of the old Horde, warriors who refused to kneel, scouts, shamans, elders, few in number but proud. They told him stories of the rise and fall, of honor twisted by bloodlust, of Gul'dan and Blackhand, and of a hero, Durotan, who had defied them all. The name hit Thrall like a hammer. "Durotan?" he asked. He was my father." The fire flickered. Grom's expression changed. "Then you are more than you know." The orcs called him Thrall, still, the only name he had known. But now, it no longer meant slave. They began to call it with pride, with respect. He trained with them, learned from them. He was taught to use the axe, not just to fight, but to defend, to protect, to lead. And in the stillness of the forest, he learned to listen again, not just with ears, but with spirit. One night, as the wind shifted and the stars swirled, an elder approached Thrall with an old, cracked scroll. "There is a place in the mountains, hidden, sacred. Your blood calls to it." The Frostwolf clan still lived, in exile, beyond the mountains, beyond the reach of humans. And so Thrall set out once more, not as a fugitive, not as a captive, but as a seeker, to find his people, to learn who he truly was, to become something more. The trail to the Frostwolves led through steep crags and icy winds. Thrall climbed ancient paths carved by time, where birds cried high above, and snow fell silently between trees twisted by age. Days passed. Nights were cold, and dreams returned, of wolf packs running across the stars, of voices deep as the mountains, and drums that pulsed like the heartbeat of the world. He followed instinct. He followed memory, though he had none. And finally, he reached them. Nestled between stone ridges, surrounded by wolves who did not snarl, the Frostwolf clan watched his arrival in silence. Wolves sniffed at his boots. Children peeked from tents of leather and hide. And the elders stood tall, spears in hand, eyes hard with years of hiding. Then an old orc stepped forward. His tusks were worn, his hair braided white, but his gaze sharp as obsidian. "You walk with Durotan's blood," the elder said. "What name do you carry?" Thrall bowed. "They called me Thrall, but I was born as Goal." The camp murmured, and the elder nodded. Then the spirits were right to whisper. The elder introduced himself as Drekthar, the last shaman of the Frostwolves. Blind, but far from helpless. He had served Durotan. He had survived exile. And he now led the clan not by sword, but by wisdom. Drekthar took Thrall under his care, not as a warrior, but as an initiate. "You were taught the blade," he said. "Now you must hear the earth." Thrall's training began anew, but this time There were no combat drills, no lashings for failure, no cages. He was told to listen to the wind, to the water, to the fire that crackled and whispered in its own language. Days were spent in silence, sitting beneath trees or beside frozen streams. At first, nothing. But slowly, the world began to speak. Leaves danced not just in wind, but in rhythm. The ground carried memory, the sky, emotion. And then, one night during a lightning storm, it happened. The sky called his name. Thunder roared across the cliffs. Rain poured from the heavens. And Thrall stood alone on a high ledge, arms outstretched, heart pounding. He did not shout. He did not demand. He asked, "Spirits, if you hear me, show me I am not alone." Lightning struck nearby, not in wrath, but in answer. A bolt leapt from sky to stone, and as it faded, a voice echoed within him. Not words, but presence. The wind swirled around him, warm and powerful. The earth beneath his feet steadied. The fire of life burned in his chest. He had connected. He was no longer just Thrall the fugitive. He was Thrall the shaman. In the weeks that followed, the elders shared stories of Durotan and Draka. Thrall listened with quiet reverence, piecing together the truth of who he was. They told him of how his parents had died in exile, of how they had refused the blood of demons, of how Durotan had tried to save the soul of the Horde and paid for it with his life. And in the flicker of the campfire, Thrall felt something more than grief. He felt resolve. He would not let their sacrifice fade into ash. He would not let the Horde remain broken. He would restore it, but not as it had been, as it was meant to be. Now, attuned to the elemental forces, Thrall could feel the spirits all around him. The wind carried news. The stones remembered battles. The flame spoke of passion and danger. He was not a warlock. He did not force power. He asked for it, and it answered. He crafted his first totem, shaped from the bone of a fallen wolf and etched with runes of gratitude. When he planted it in the earth, the frost melted in a ring around it. The spirits had accepted him. And so it was that when Thrall stood once more on the cliffside, cloaked in the colors of his people, shamanic energy coursing through his veins, he knew it was time to return to the world, to find the scattered orcs, to tear down the cages they still lived in, to rebuild the Horde, not for conquest, but for freedom and for honor. The mountains behind him, the spirits within him. Thrall descended from the Frostwolf sanctuary not as a runaway, but as something new, a shaman, a warrior, a soul stitched together by purpose and pain. His journey was no longer one of survival, but one of calling. He would not just find his people, he would free them. The first internment camp he reached was guarded by humans, soldiers who had long since grown weary of their post. The orcs inside were quiet, slumped, their spirits faded to ash. Thrall did not storm the gates. He waited. He watched. He listened to the wind, to the earth beneath the prison. He felt its weariness and its potential. And then, in the cloak of night, he moved. Using the elemental spirits, he bent the wind to silence his steps. He softened the earth beneath the feet of the guards, and when he reached the center of the camp, he lit a single flame. A signal. From the hills a band of warriors emerged, not many, but proud. Gromesh Hellscream at their head. Steel clashed with steel, shackles fell. The camp erupted not in screams, but in breath. Orcs who had forgotten how to stand, stood, for the first time in years. After the battle, Grom approached Thrall, wiping blood from his axe. "You're no mere cub now," he said. "The spirits walk with you." Thrall nodded. "This is only the beginning." Grom smiled, the kind of grin only a warrior wore when history turned in his favor. "Then lead, shaman, and we'll follow." Over the months that followed, Thrall and Grom traveled from camp to camp. They did not conquer, they liberated. At each camp, Thrall spoke to the prisoners, not with orders, but with reminders. He spoke of the old Horde, not the blood-cursed one, but the honorable clans before corruption. He spoke of unity, of family, of purpose. And the orcs listened. Chains became memories, memories became fire, fire became strength. And slowly, a new horde was born, not in the image of Gul'dan, but in the vision of Durotan. In time, the path led back to the place where it all began, Durnhold Keep, where Blackmoor still ruled with drink and delusion, where Teretha still lived, quietly, secretly hoping that Thrall still lived. He did. And he returned not with chains, but with thunder. The walls trembled as the spirits rose with him. Stone cracked. Flames danced in silent reverence. Thrall fought his way through the fortress, not to destroy it, but to bring closure. At the end, he confronted Blackmoor, once master, now broken. "You could have been king," Blackmoor slurred, blade trembling. "I made you." Thrall stepped forward, calm as wind. "You forged my chains, but I shattered them." He spared him no more words, and when the smoke cleared, Durnhold was gone. In the ruins, he found Teretha, still alive, still kind. They shared no long goodbye, only a look and a thank you spoken in silence. Then he turned and walked into the wild once more. The past buried, the future burning. Thrall gathered the clans. He carried no crown, no title. And yet, when he stood before them, the wind grew still. The sky listened. He held up the red banner, marked not by conquest, but by hope. "We are the sons and daughters of warriors," he said. "Not beasts, not slaves. We are the Horde, and we walk the path of honor." The orcs roared in answer, not as one tribe, but as a nation reborn. The fires of Durnhold had barely cooled. The new horde stood stronger than ever, bound by honor and hope. But the skies above Azeroth had begun to darken once more. In dreams and stillness, the wind began to whisper. A voice, distant, ancient, urgent. It came to Thrall not in words, but in presence, a ripple in the fabric of the world, a pulse echoing across stone and sky. Then, one night, a figure emerged in vision, cloaked in black, eyes like stars behind a mask of shadows. Medivh, the last guardian. "The world is changing," Medivh said. "The Burning Legion returns. If your people are to survive, you must go west, to Kalimdor." News spread fast, demons returning, the veil between worlds growing thin. And in the eastern kingdoms, war brewed once more between humans and undead. A storm was coming, and Azeroth was its battlefield. Thrall gathered the clans. He spoke of visions, of Medivh, of Kalimdor, a name that meant nothing, and yet everything. "We must go," he said, "not to flee, but to begin anew." And the Horde, once scattered, now followed. They built ships, sturdy and strong, upon the shores of Lordaeron, and beneath the rising moon the sails were raised. The Horde set sail. The sea was no friend. Winds howled with fury, waves crashed with thunder, and the sky split with lightning, as if the heavens themselves rejected this exodus. Thrall stood at the prow of the lead ship, cloak-soaked, eyes forward. He did not speak. He listened to the storm, to the elements, to the distant hum of destiny. Many ships were lost, others scattered. but Thrall's vessel endured. After days adrift, they landed not on Kalimdor, but on a chain of islands shrouded in mist. Here they met another people, fierce, lean, and watchful from the jungle trees, the Darkspear Trolls, led by a chieftain named Vol'jin, son of Sen'jin. The Trolls were besieged, not by demons but by murlocs, and worse. Thrall offered help, and in the fire of battle trust was born. They fought side by side, orcs and trolls, strangers bound by survival. But in the chaos, Sen'jin was taken. Thrall found him too late, wounded but clear of mind. You are more than just warrior," Sen'jin whispered. "The spirits show me. Your path is storm and sun. You will lead not just your kind, but many." Thrall held his hand as the elder passed, and when the Darkspear mourned, Thrall stood beside them. He offered them place, a future, a home beyond the waves. And Vol'jin, fierce with grief but proud with honor, accepted. "We follow you, Thrall," he said, "to Kalimdor, and beyond." At last, the western continent rose from the sea, Kalimdor, a land vast and wild, forests thick with ancient magic, canyons carved by time. Here the orcs found earth untouched by war. And here they met another people, the Tauren, giants of horn and hoof, noble, spiritual, close to the land. They were under siege by Centaur, nomadic raiders who drove them from their ancestral homes. Thrall, seeing kinship in their plight, offered his blade. And once again, the Horde fought, not for conquest, but for protection. Together, orcs, trolls, and Tauren stood against the Centaur. And when the dust settled, the Tauren leader, Cairn Bloodhoof, placed his hand upon Thrall's shoulder. "You carry the burden of many," he said, "but you do not carry it alone." They shared fire that night, and food, and dreams. And so the new Horde grew, not just orcs, but allies, not just warriors, but family. In the canyons near the sea, Thrall chose a place, dry, red, windswept, not soft, but strong. Here the Horde would build their home. They named it Durotar, in honor of Thrall's father. And in its heart a city would rise, carved from stone and will. Orgrimmar, named for Orgrim Doomhammer, the fallen hero who once carried the weight Thrall now bore. The drums of war were silent for now. Only hammers rang through the hills, and beneath the sun, a dream began to take shape. The winds across Durotar were dry, but peaceful. The city of Orgrimmar had begun to rise, its bones carved from the red earth, its soul forged in unity. Thrall stood often upon its highest cliffs, watching the sun dip below the western horizon, thinking of all that had been gained, and all that might yet be lost, because peace is always temporary. And beyond the sea, darkness stirred once more. Whispers reached the coast. Archimond, a demon lord of the Burning Legion, had returned. The Legion, ancient and unstoppable, sought to consume the world once again. Their eyes had turned to Mount Hyjal, where the world tree stood tall, its roots drinking from the very essence of life itself. Thrall felt it in the stones beneath his feet, in the sky's trembling breath. The spirits grew restless. The storm had come. It was Jaina Proudmoore, the human sorceress, who came first. She arrived not with blades, but with a plea. "Thrall," she said, standing before him in dust and fatigue, "the Legion is coming, and if we do not stand together, all will fall." Thrall, surprised but steady, nodded slowly. "We are not enemies, Jaina. Not anymore." She blinked, not in disbelief, but in relief. The past was not forgotten, but the future was bigger than pride. They journeyed north, together, orcs and humans side by side, with trolls and tauren marching beneath banners once torn by war. In the forests of Ashenvale, the trees whispered caution. The night elves, ancient and secretive, watched from shadow. They had seen too much, lost too much. But when Malfurion Stormrage emerged, a druid of immense power bearing sorrow and hope, he too saw in Thrall a leader worth trusting. And so, for the first time, Horde, Alliance, and Kaldori stood together. Mount Hyjal rose like a god's shoulder against the clouds. At its peak, Nordrassil, the world tree, ancient, glowing with life. And from the twisting nether, Archimond came, a behemoth of fire and fury, shadow and flame. He marched not with armies, but with destruction. The united forces made their stand. They fought in waves, first the humans and dwarves, then the orcs and trolls, then the night elves. Each line held, each line broke, each line bled. Thrall fought at the front, lightning in his hands, his hammer singing with the fury of the sky. He did not fight for conquest, he fought for life. Even united, they could not stop Archimond. His power was too great, each step crushed centuries beneath it. But Malfurion had a plan. He called upon the wisps, ancient spirits of the forest, dormant, but listening. And when Archimond reached the world tree, they answered. A storm of light and bark and memory consumed the demon. He screamed, a sound not of pain, but of unmaking. And then he was gone, ashes on the wind. Silence returned to Hyjal, a silence filled with loss and awe. The alliance was uneasy, but real. Malfurion bowed to Jaina, Jaina to Thrall, and Thrall to all of them. "Let this not be a moment," he said quietly. "Let this be a beginning." They parted not as friends, but not as enemies. And that was enough. Back in Durotar, Thrall knelt before a quiet pool, watching the stars ripple in its surface. He had seen the end of the world, and helped to prevent it. He had fought alongside those once hated. He had bled for a world that once tried to chain him, and now he understood. The Horde was not a race, not a cause, not even a history. It was a promise to live with honor, to protect the balance, to never be led by darkness again. And under that starlit sky, Thrall, son of Durotan, smiled softly. With Archimond vanquished and the world spared annihilation, the drums of war grew quiet. But quiet does not mean peace, and peace does not come easily. The Horde, now forged by shared struggle, returned to Kalimdor, and there, in the scorched canyons between sea and mountain, they began to build. Durotar, a land named for Thrall's father, dry, rugged, unyielding, like the orcs who now called it home. In its heart would rise a city not of gold, but of grit. Orgrimmar, in honor of Orgrim Doomhammer, the warrior who had entrusted Thrall with the future. Stone by stone, plank by plank, the new Horde shaped its legacy. Leadership is not forged in battle alone. It is tested in the quiet, in sleepless nights, in hard choices, in voices that disagree and must still be heard. Thrall found himself not just a warchief, but a shepherd. He balanced the needs of orcs, trolls, tauren, each with their own culture, their own wounds, their own dreams. He sat in council with Vol'jin of the Darkspear, with Cairn Bloodhoof, wise and steady, and though he held the title of Warchief, he led not by decree, but by listening. But even among allies, not all was calm. Some orcs still yearned for the old ways, for conquest, for battle, for vengeance. Among them was a warrior rising in strength and reputation. Garrosh Hellscream, son of Grommash. Thrall saw in him a reflection of the Horde's struggle, pride, pain, potential, but also danger. Your father died a hero, Thrall told him, but he lived in darkness. You must choose your own path. Garrosh said little, but his eyes burned with something unresolved. Thrall knew the Horde could not survive in isolation, so he reached out cautiously to old enemies. He met again with Jaina Proudmoore, now settled in Theramore to the south. They spoke not as commanders, but as leaders. They shared tea, maps, memories, and for a while hope flickered. A world not of war, but of coexistence. But not all shared that vision. Tensions brewed at the borders. Skirmishes broke out between Horde settlers and human patrols. Centaurs raided the Tauren caravans. Naga stirred along the coasts, and from the shadows, a darker presence watched. Old gods, whispers in caves, corruption beneath the soil. Thrall felt it in the spirits, a restlessness, as if the world itself braced for another storm. Then the land shook. Mountains cracked, rivers vanished. The sky screamed with fire, a cataclysm. Azeroth itself cried out in pain, torn by forces ancient and malevolent. And in the trembling echoes, Thrall made a choice. He would not lead from a throne. He would walk the world again, not as Warchief, but as shaman. The sky no longer whispered. It screamed. Flames tore across the horizon. Oceans swallowed coasts. Mountains shattered like glass. The cataclysm had come, and with it, the rise of a terrible force. Deathwing, the Destroyer, a once noble dragon driven mad by the whispers of the old gods. He did not seek a dominion. He sought unraveling. And the world trembled at his shadow. Thrall felt the pain not just in his heart, but in the elements. The fire was wild. The wind was wounded. The earth cracked and groaning. No longer did the spirits answer easily. They raged. They cried. And so Thrall made a decision. He would leave his place as Warchief and answer the call of the world. Before he departed, Thrall summoned his allies, Vol'jin, Cairn, Eitrigg, and others. And then he turned to one, Garrosh Hellscream, proud, strong, uncompromising. I entrust the Horde to you, Thrall said. Lead with honor. Garrosh did not smile. He simply bowed his head. And, for better or worse, the mantle of Warchief passed. Thrall traveled to the heart of chaos, to the gaping wound in the world where the sea churned into the sky, the maelstrom. There, he joined with the earthen ring, a circle of shamans dedicated to elemental balance. Together they sought to heal the fractures, to mend the broken song of the world. But even there, Thrall struggled. The elements rejected him. Too much anger, too much grief, too much doubt. He meditated beside lava. He walked barefoot across shattered plains. He listened and waited. But the silence hurt more than the noise ever had. He began to question everything. Had he led the Horde astray? Had he chosen the wrong successor? Had he failed? One night, the wind refused to touch him, and the fire would not warm him. He was a shaman in name, but not in balance. It was in the lost realm of Deepholm, within the heart of the earth, that Thrall found guidance once more. There, he met Therazane, the elemental lord of earth, and through trials of stone and silence, he learned again to listen, not with will, but with humility. He let go of control. He opened himself to pain, and in doing so, the elements whispered again. Thrall re-emerged not as a warchief, but as something more ancient, a bridge between mortal and spirit, a guardian of balance. He did not command the elements. He walked with them, and with this newfound peace, he helped steady the maelstrom, held the world together with voice and stone and sacrifice. The world did not fall. And in the stillness that followed, Thrall closed his eyes and breathed. Thrall had once stepped down in hope. He believed the Horde needed strength, unbending, fearless, bold. He believed Garrosh Hellscream could be that strength. But when he returned from the Maelstrom, he did not find the Horde he had left. He found a war machine, cities scorched, trolls and tauren silenced, the orcs raised above all, and the Horde used not for unity, but for dominion. Garrosh ruled not as Warchief, but as a tyrant. Thrall spoke with Vol'jin, now exiled from Orgrimmar. He walked among the tauren, heard whispers from the Darkspear trolls, and listened to goblins, Forsaken, and blood elves murmuring unrest. The Horde was breaking from within, and Thrall knew it was his doing. I made this choice, he told Cairn's son Bane, and now I must bear it. It came to war. The Horde, or what remained of it, stood with the rebels, and beside them the Alliance marched. Together they laid siege to Orgrimmar, to the very city Thrall had helped build, to the throne he had entrusted. Below its gates drums pounded. Above, smoke curled like a warning. The earth trembled as the armies clashed. Stone cracked, flames roared, and at the end, in the heart of the scorched Undercity, stood Garrosh. Proud, defiant, unyielding, Thrall stepped forward, not with army, not with anger, but with grief. You were meant to lead us, he said, not with chains, but with courage. Garrosh spat. You made me Warchief, Thrall. You wanted a weapon, and I gave you one. And so they fought. Shaman versus warlord. Stone against steel. Sky against fire. It was not a duel of strength, but of truth. Garrosh was defeated. Not killed, not yet. He was taken to Pandaria to stand trial. Thrall watched as the world judged him, as his crimes were laid bare, as his name was written not in glory, but in ashes. He had wanted a better future, but dreams alone are not enough. They must be built and protected. In time, Thrall stepped back once more. He returned to Nagrand, to a quiet life, with Agra, his beloved. They raised a child beneath the stars, and when the wind passed through the grass, he still heard the spirits speak, sometimes in sorrow, sometimes in joy, but always in balance. Thrall was many things: a child of exile, a slave, a shaman, a warchief, but most of all, a bridge between war and peace, between past and future, between the spirits and the world. He was not perfect, but he always listened, and in his story, a lesson for us all. And so, dear listener, we bring to a close the long winding tale of Thrall, son of Duratan, soul of the Horde, and steward of balance. May his story, filled with hardship, hope, and honor, carry you gently into rest. Let the drums of war fall silent now, replaced by the quiet hum of the wind and the steady heartbeat of a world still worth fighting for. If this journey through Azeroth brought you peace, if you felt the echoes of its spirit in your dreams, consider joining us again. Subscribe to Whispers of Warcraft for more deep, immersive lore told under starlit skies. Leave a gentle like to help this story reach others seeking calm. And if you'd like to hear another tale, perhaps of Arthas, Illidan, or Sylvanas, leave a comment below and let your whisper be heard. Until next time, sleep well, and may the spirits watch over you.